but I did take the CDPSE and I did pass it at the first try. I think that it is something that can definitely be done. Hello and welcome back to Privacy Professional Training. My name is Fumi. Today's video, we're going to be looking at how I passed the CDPSE exam and how you can too. So without further ado, let's talk a little bit about what the CDPSE exam is and some of the logistics around the questions and the exam time, etc. So the CDPSE exam is a privacy certification offered by the ISACA group. It is 120 questions. You have 3.5 hours to answer all those questions, and it tests you in different domains to ensure that you're in good shape to facilitate or assist organizations with their privacy engineering. Now, what I want to talk about for the CDPSE is there is a prerequisite. Now, a lot of the IAPP exams don't have a prerequisite, but the CISSP exam and the CDPSE exam have prerequisites. You have to have done continuous privacy work for 3 years before you get the designation. So what I mean by that is if you take the exam in 2025, but you haven't been working continuously in privacy, you have to demonstrate 3 years of working experience in privacy in order for you to get the designation of CDPSE. So if you take the exam in 2025 and you start working in privacy this year and you continue it for 3 years, then you can earn the designation in 2028. That's what I mean. So for me personally, at the time, I didn't apply for the CDPSE because I had a lot of work going on, but I applied for it earlier this year and I got the designation. You have up to 5 years to have the 3 continuous years of working in privacy to get the designation. So that's what I wanted to say about logistics. Now, let's talk about what ISACA offers you. ISACA actually has a lot of different resources. They have questions that you can buy, which are really very useful. They have a textbook that you can have as a digital copy or a paper copy. I've told you guys before that I always buy the digital copy, which is why I don't have anything physical to show you. Same with the questions. I also bought those as a digital copy. Now, the other thing that I did was this is a relatively new exam. It's kind of like the AIGP. It's not been around for a very long time, like other privacy certifications. So I went to Amazon to see if there were additional resources related to the CDPSE. And at the time, this was a number of years ago, there weren't any CDPSE resources. So what I really leveraged was the textbook for this exam. And then I also went on to Scribd to see if there were any free resources. At the time I took the test, I think it was about 2 or 3 years old. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was 2 or 3 years old. Now it's probably like 6 or 7 years old, so you can actually find additional resources. If you are preparing for this test and you're looking for unofficial questions to assist you, I've actually created some, and you can check the description below to buy those additional questions if they will be helpful for your studies. Now, I want to talk a little bit about privacy as a whole because that will give you some insight into why I found this particular test a little bit challenging. Now, privacy engineering really looks at privacy from a product perspective and making sure different elements like privacy by design and privacy by default exist in different products. Now, the privacy that I primarily deal with from a program standpoint is I provide legal advisory to clients on personal data usage in different geographies, the onset of different products and how they utilize personal data. I also look at data protection impact assessments for high-risk processing activities. The portion of the privacy program that I traditionally work on doesn't include me building out different products based on a specification from the engineering side. So a lot of my work is more risk assessment. Privacy engineers actually build the product to ensure that privacy by design exists in those products. So even though I understood the privacy concepts, the simpler ones like personal data, controller, processor, there were new concepts in the CDPSE exam that I wasn't traditionally familiar with because I don't conduct any of the engineering of products. So let me give you some more insight into engineering. What happens is, and this is a process that a lot of clients follow, not every client, but some clients. A lot of clients will have an idea of the products that they want to launch in a year. So the first stage of that is the security team and the IT team will come up with a proof of concept for the product. When they come up with the proof of concept for the product, they will then present it to the legal team, whether that's legal from a commercial standpoint and then legal from the privacy standpoint. Now, at this stage, the privacy engineer is taking notes. The privacy engineer is not providing input, they're just taking notes based on legal advisory from both the legal team and the privacy team. Hey, this is what you should implement in this product. This is the personal data we can process in this geography. Questions like that. Once that has all been decided by the legal teams, the privacy engineer will make sure that the product that's being created includes all of those requirements that the legal team has written out. Now, that's the step that I don't take part in. I just provide legal advisory for how the product should be presented to consumers. So the engineer actually builds the product. Now, that product may be an application, it may be a physical product like a baby monitor. That really does depend, but the CDPSE has more focus on the engineering of the product. So if that's the space that you work in, the CDPSE is definitely for you. If you are a privacy attorney or a privacy analyst, I still recommend taking the CDPSE exam because it's going to help you in conversations with different business groups when you're trying to understand the product. That's why I took the test, because there are very complex technologies that companies are coming out with in 2025. And even more so now, artificial intelligence is now a component that organizations are trying to include in their products. You need to be able to understand the product to give good privacy advisory. Learning those new concepts is really crucial. When I was studying for the CDPSE exam, I spent 3.5 months. I spent 3.5 months because it was the first ISACA exam that I had taken. And for anybody that's new, ISACA is the certifying body that provides the designation CDPSE to students that take the test. So it was the first ISACA exam that I had taken, and I was more familiar with the IAPP exams and how they are structured, but this one was slightly different and it also had more questions. So a lot of the IAPP privacy exams have 90 questions. CDPSE had 120 questions. So outside of the questions that they provided, I think it was 100 questions. I will double check and I will leave it in the description. I think ISACA provides 100 questions. And then I also had the textbook. So again, I did my usual method. I read the textbook through once. I created a schedule so that I understood how many pages I was reading a day. And then I started taking the questions at the weekend. Now, there are flashcards that you can get from Quizlet, and Quizlet.com is a free site where you don't have to pay for any resources. You can just access flashcards. And again, this is a privacy certification, so there was a lot of overlap in terms of concepts like personal data and understanding things like that. I recommend buying both ISACA resources that they have available, even if you are a seasoned privacy professional, because how the questions are structured are slightly different. I'll say that. I did my page, I did my regular page. I woke up in the morning again, and I didn't book the exam until I was 85% sure that I would pass the test, which is unique for me because if you've watched other videos, I talk about booking the exam about a month in advance or booking it when I know I'm going to take it and then picking the day kind of closer to the time. I made sure I went through all the questions and I really understood the textbook this time because, like I said, it was the first ISACA exam that I've taken. The other really useful thing is ISACA provides some insight into how their exams are structured. You'll see the different domains that they test you on, and they do provide a lot of insight into what the domain consists of. So you can actually take initiative and find additional resources. Google is your friend, and Google has so much more information outside of what ISACA provides. And if there are any concepts that you're really struggling on, you can actually use Google and leverage other PDF resources that are available for free online. You don't always have to buy the resources offered by the certifying body. I personally always have. But if you're resourceful, you can find all of the information from the domains and you can find it online, either free or less than the textbook for ISACA. So let's talk a bit more about strategy. Let me tell you about my outline for the CDPSE. For my outline for the CDPSE, I did not try to leave out any information, even if it was concepts that I knew in the past. And the reason I was very cautious about this test is because it has more questions than the IAPP exams, and I also didn't have many practice questions. I've talked about this in other videos where for other tests, I traditionally will have 2 to 3 times the amount of questions that are going to be tested for the test. So for the IAPP, they test 90 questions. I always purchase 270. But for ISACA, at the time when I took the test, they only had the questions ISACA was offering. I didn't find other resources from other privacy professionals or different groups that I could purchase at that time. So my outline was definitely more detailed. And I didn't start the outline until month 2 of my studies, after I had read the textbook through 1.5 times. As I was studying that second month, going into the third month and the rest of the month, I made sure that I wrote an outline that covered every concept. And I didn't miss any out, even if I knew them in the past. Even if they had appeared in a different privacy certification, I made sure that I wrote it in my outline. And then the last week before my test, I revisited my outline. That last week, I don't read the textbook because I think that the studies I've done up until that point should carry me through for the test. Most of the concepts I would have already read. A lot of them I would have already mastered. So reading the book 1 week before the exam, I think makes me feel a bit under pressure, and it's best for me to go into the test knowing that I've already succeeded than for me to revisit the book and find a concept that I'm not very sure of and then second guess myself. So that's my own strategy personally. You can choose to do what you want for your own study schedule, but I did take the CDPSE and I did pass it at the first try. I think that it is something that can definitely be done, and one of the reasons I really feel inclined to make these videos is because I want you guys to understand that every certification doesn't have the same amount of resources. So you have to make sure that you are doing your own research when you're going into these tests to make sure you prepare yourself as best as you can. If you've listened to other videos that I've made about other certs that I've taken, there have been some certifications that I had 20 resources. There have been some certifications I've only had 3 resources. So it's really important for you to understand how you study. I will leave a link in the description of everything I use for the CDPSE. If you are taking the exam, good luck, and I'll see you in another video.